When you think of horrible movies, what comes to mind? It's usually the worst of the worst, like Food Fight or Baby Geniuses or Jack and Jill.
What's this about a twin?
Oh, Jackie has a twin sister.
Identical or fraternal?
Nocturnal, like a bat.
Ugh. Well, once upon a time, the Final Fantasy team, known back then as just Square, decided to throw a ludicrous amount of money towards a CGI movie which they wanted to be the most realistic the world has ever seen. So realistic, in fact, that they even wanted the lead model to be in other movies, but their plans didn't exactly go the way they wanted. You see, at the time, CGI movies didn't exactly look great. The technology just wasn't there yet. However, a video game series at the time known for their incredible visual cutscenes was Square, with games like Final Fantasy X having cutscenes like this. The movie had a budget of $137 million. That's about $244 million in today's money, and it made nowhere near that. The movie was wrecked in its reviews, mostly stating that while it looks good, that's pretty much the only good thing about it. Listen, I could go on and on and on about how bad this movie is. I've seen it. Trust me, it's terrible. But the bottom line is, it wrecked Square financially, and it had to be bailed out by Sony in return for their games being exclusive on PlayStation for a few years. After the abysmal sales of the movie, the story goes that the Final Fantasy character designer Tetsuya Nomura shared an elevator with a Disney of Japan executive one day as they shared an office building. He pitched this crossover concept and it was later approved. Originally, Square wanted the main character to be Donald Duck while Disney wanted Mickey. Nomura designed Sora, an original character, under the agreement that the rights to him belonged to Disney. Knowing this, it's easy to see the design similarities between Sora and Mickey. The basic premise of the game is a fusion between Disney and Final Fantasy, with the setting of most of the worlds being those of classic Disney films and the gameplay and some supporting characters being those from the Final Fantasy series. For example, Cloud from Final Fantasy VII has a pretty major role in the world of Hercules. Somehow, once you get past the initial weirdness of it all, the crossovers start to feel kind of natural. Anyway, the game eventually came out on March 28, 2002, and it was a huge success to the point of getting into the top 10 best-selling PS2 games of all time. Now let's get into the plot. As the title of the video may suggest, the plot of this game didn't get too ridiculous until the sequels, but I digress. After the intro cutscene, which consists of Sora falling down a lot, he wakes up on a stained glass platform and is told how to perform basic functions like walking forward and opening doors. Eventually, a colossal dark humanoid figure appears with a giant hole in his chest shaped like a heart, and Sora destroys him by hitting his arm repeatedly. After this, you wake up for real on a beach. This beach is your home, Destiny Islands, and Sora and his friends Riku and Kairi talk about wanting to go out and see the world, and thus should build a raft and actually go out and do it.
Kairi's home is out there somewhere, right?
Could be. We'll never know by staying here.
But how far could a raft take us?
Who knows? If we have to, we'll think of something else.
So, suppose you get to another world. What would you do there?
Well, I haven't really thought about it.
At one point, Riku explains the concept of a star-shaped fruit that grows on palm trees nearby called the Paupu fruit, which is said to bind the destinies of those who share it.
You wanted one, didn't you?
A Paupu fruit?
If two people share one, their destinies become intertwined. They'll remain a part of each other's lives, no matter what. Come on, I know you want to try it.
What are you talking?
He then tries to cuck Sora by telling him that he gets to do it with Kairi if he beats him in a race. A totally fucking bullshit race. There's a secret cave of sorts in the back of the island which Sora finds a hooded deep-voiced figure in who talks about connected worlds and how Sora doesn't know anything. He then disappears and Sora tells nobody of this. Also, can I just say that if like my friends and I at 14 years old found a wooden door in a cave, we would have taken hammers to that shit in like a day. Anyway, after gathering the supplies and heading home for the night, Sora notices a storm is cast over the island. Heading back to save the raft, he's soon overwhelmed by small black creatures and finds a key-shaped weapon in his hands. Heading back to the weird cave that had that weird guy in it, Sora finds Kairi, but not really. In another world, our side protagonists, Donald and Goofy, are given instructions by Mickey to find the key and use their vessel to travel to different worlds and locate it. Coincidentally, they end up at the same town where Sora finds Leon from Final Fantasy VIII. They fight, and afterwards he explains what the creatures are. They're called the Heartless. They go after and consume the hearts of others and eventually bring entire worlds down with them. They're hunting Keyblade wielders since the Keyblade is the most useful weapon in fighting against them. Leon explains that he lost his world to Heartless in the same way, and that the king where he's from, a man named Ansem, was the top researcher of the Heartless, but now he's missing too. Oh yeah, and Yuffie and Aerith from Final Fantasy VII are there as well. Anyway, the Disney duo crash land onto Sora, and after fighting what is basically Rayman, they agree to work together and travel to other worlds to try to find Mickey, Riku, and Kairi using their gummy ship, a spaceship consisting of a special gummy material able to allow the user to travel between walls that separate worlds. During this, a group of Disney villains explain that there are 7 Princesses of Heart needed to unlock the keyhole to Kingdom Hearts. Okay, that sentence was a lot, so let's break that down. The 7 Princesses of Light are 7 maidens with hearts containing no darkness and only pure light. Maleficent's goal is to find, kidnap, and gather all 7 of them to unlock a special keyhole. Keyholes in this context refer to something known as the heart of a world. It's through this keyhole that Heartless can enter the world's core, infest it, and drown it in darkness, destroying the world forever. However, Keyblades can lock these for good. Kingdom Hearts is the heart of all worlds and the source of their power. Anyway, after Sora, Donald, and Goofy are fucking around in Disney Worlds for a while, Maleficent soon takes Riku under her control and manipulates him into doing her bidding by telling him that she'll help them find Kairi, and by telling him that Sora abandoned him for Goofy and Donald. Riku does end up finding Kairi, but she's unconscious since her heart is missing. Heart, in this context, refers to the concept of one, made up of light and darkness. Make sense? Of course it doesn't. Throughout the series, there's a few characters who study the concept of hearts and still have nothing to show for it. For example, Dr. Finkelstein tries to make a heart from scratch after studying a Heartless, but after Oogie Boogie steals it and consumes it, it barely works.
Now, let's see if I can get their attention. Oh, Heartless! This is it? Nobody disrespects me!
In the most basic form, living things in the Kingdom Hearts series are composed of heart, body, and soul. The body being the physical vessel, and the soul being what gives it life. Sora and friends get the Hollow Bastion, the base of Maleficent. When Riku confronts Sora about his Keyblade, he somehow steals it from him, and Goofy and Donald abandon you like real jerk-offs, stating that their entire mission was to follow the key anyway. Leaving you stranded with the Beast from Beauty and the Beast and equipped only with the wooden sword from Destiny Islands, the two of you fight your way through the castle. You find Riku again and beat his ass after he shows you his weird new muscular skin suit and you get your weapon back. Riku then runs away embarrassed. Finding Riku a third time, he's got his own Keyblade, one he says can unlock people's hearts. He says he's no longer Riku, but Ansem, and explains that Kairi is the last Princess of Heart that they need. Not only this, but Kairi's heart has been trapped inside Sora this entire time, and because of this, after defeating Ansem, Sora can't seal Hollow Bastion's keyhole. Turning the weapon on himself, he releases his and Kairi's heart, with Sora turning into a Heartless, and Kairi's heart simply returning since it contains no darkness. As a Heartless, Sora makes his way through the castle and has his body restored with Kairi's heart. Afterwards, the group follows Ansem to a world made of destroyed Heartless worlds and finds him at the world's core. Here you fight Ansem at a destroyed Destiny Island until he turns himself into a giant floating flesh ship. Once all is said and done, Kingdom Hearts reveals itself and Ansem commands it to empower him with darkness. Sora tells him no you and the doors open to reveal pure light, which destroys Ansem pretty much instantly. Running over to close the giant doors, they find Riku and King Mickey on the other side, the latter of which uses his Keyblade, an inversion verted of Sora's, to seal his side. Sora then finds Kairi wandering around in the darkness, but as the worlds are breaking apart and reconstructing themselves, the two soon separate and promise to find each other as soon as they can. The credits roll, and later on shows that while wandering down some fields, Pluto has a letter for them stamped with the King's insignia, leading them to their next game. Now as for gameplay, this game holds up surprisingly well for how old it is. Now for reference, I most recently did my playthrough on the PlayStation 4 collection, which is the most optimal way to play in my opinion. As for combat, it's not super complicated, as most of the fan base calls it mash X to win. I wouldn't say that they're wrong, but it's one of those things that on a surface level is simple, but can get more intricate, especially when fighting endgame stuff. There's a huge collection of weapons, not just for Sora, but Donald and Goofy as well. Each Keyblade has its own hit effects and sounds when striking enemies, and its different stats lead you to strategize, especially when fighting the aforementioned endgame bosses. The sound design in this game is one of my favorites even to this day. Everything just sounds so satisfying. The music, done by the legendary Yoko Shimomura, holds up extremely well and is still on my regular playlist rotation. Not to mention the intro song Simple and Clean by Utada Hikaru being an essential part of any Weeaboo's playlist since the release of this game. Of course, all this good is never without some bad, like for instance, in the beginning of the game, you have a choice of 3 weapons, a shield, a staff, and a sword. You must choose one and get rid of one. Of course, the game doesn't tell you what this does, but it has a huge impact on how your game will play out by affecting when you learn certain abilities. Also on the island, you choose 3 arbitrary questions that affect how often you level up, again, not told to the player in any way. Back in 2002, you couldn't just look shit like this up, so you had no real way of knowing. I mean, unless you bought the Prima Strategy Guide or whatever. This is a bit of a nitpick, but the grind to gather materials for the Ultima weapon, the final and strongest Keyblade in the game, was an enormous pain in the ass, consisting of soft resetting the game constantly. I mean, you don't exactly need it, but if you're going for achievements or 100% save like I was, be prepared for some frustrating luck-based grinds. The gummy ship segments are pretty hit or miss. Some people like them, some people hate them. I'm just kind of in the middle. It's fine, I guess. If anything, it's just really boring. Some of the texturing really sucks, and I understand that this is a 20-something-year-old game that was never meant to be blown up on a 70-inch high-definition screen, but I feel like there could have been some better cleanup on the textures, especially ones that we see close up more often. However, all of this is absolutely worth the amazing amount of content within, and it goes without saying that even though it takes around 10 to 15 hours to beat, it's pretty well rounded and never really gets too boring at any point. I know the most common complaint is that it's a bit slow to start, but once it gets going, it stays pretty engaging. Also, can we just take a moment to recognize the absolute absurdity that this even exists? Disney is super protective over their characters, especially their main 3, so the fact that they're allowed to fight and get hurt is pretty insane. Not to mention that in one of the later games, there's a scene where Mickey gets chokeslammed against a wall. The game that started this ridiculous journey is still very much worth playing and has hundreds of hours combined in the series to delve into. And I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10. Until next time, this has been your host Gooba, and remember, pee is stored in the balls, poop is stored in the butt cheeks.